What is happening, super fans? You are listening to Behind the Mask, the show where we chat with your favorite superhero fiction authors about the worlds and heroes they are writing. Behind the Mask is brought to you by the folks over at superherofiction.com. I'm your host, Franklin Kendrick, and today on the show, I am excited to be chatting with author Nick Svolos. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for letting me be here.
Very glad to have you. And also for the listeners out there, I know this will be a delayed schedule, but today is also Veterans Day. So I just want to wish you a happy Veterans Day.
Thank you very much. This is my day off.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like, take what you can get.
I'll take it when I can.
Yes. So my first question right off the bat is, when you're not behind the keyboard writing superhero fiction, what is your secret identity out there in the real world?
Well, my secret identity is I'm a website developer, software developer, and a substitute teacher, and I'm a dad and husband.
So not a whole lot, not a huge plate full.
No, I'm at that point in my career where the jobs are fewer and farther between because everybody wants to hire youngsters, and gives me more time to write. Fortunately, we're in a position where I can get away with that.
Oh yes, and I'm sure for the people that are reading the books, the question is always, where's the next one? How long till the next one?
I got a guy that bugs me about that pretty much every week. So.
Oh my gosh, it's the best problems to have as writers.
Yeah, there you go.
Can't ask for more. So my next question for you is, what got you into writing in the very beginning of wherever your journey started? And then what sort of steered you towards doing books in the superhero fiction genre?
Well, I started writing professionally back when I was in college, back in the days when you still had magazines. And I wrote for a magazine called Computer Games Strategy Plus. And my job was, as a freelancer, was they would mail me a bunch of floppy disks, as games were still packaged on 3.5-inch floppy disks. And I would, if I could get the game running, I would do a review or a strategy guide. And then it would get to the magazine and get published. And, we did this over CompuServe to kind of give you a framework for how old that is. And then I got out of it totally because that magazine finally went belly up. Everything went digital and they didn't make the transition. And I went and had real work for 20, 30 years. And until about 2015, when I had the worst year ever, in the space of like 3 months, I got laid off from my longtime gig and found out I had multiple sclerosis. So I was kind of sidelined and wasn't really able to work. They were putting me through tests and different medications and stuff. So I just decided I was just to do something, I was going to start writing. And I had an idea, because I love superheroes. That was always one of my obsessions. I'm a sci-fi fantasy reader, but superheroes at the time, I could not find superheroes in prose format. In other words, I knew there were novels because what's his name? Jim Butcher did a Spider-Man book that I read. But when you go out on Amazon, you type in superheroes and you find 120 paranormal erotica novels. You don't find a lot of superhero stuff. So I thought, what, nobody's doing this? So I kind of put together an idea and I started sitting down writing my first novel with no idea what I was doing or how to structure it. And that was the first draft of The Hero Beat. And then it just kind of, that took off. Since then, I've done some fantasy stuff, and I've got a couple of science fiction projects in the works, but I keep coming back to the superhero because it's really my love. I just dig. You can take any story and yeah, that's right. Somebody else wants to be in in the show. You can take any story and make it a superhero story, pretty much, because it's really a matter of there's genre and then there's story. Mm-hmm. And you want to do a romance, you can set it in the superhero, you can set it in sci-fi background. but with superheroes, you get to turn everything up to 11. You know, instead of just, we're going to destroy a city, we're going to destroy the universe. Or, so anyways, I'm rambling.
Fine.
That's kind of why I ended up there. Is I could just go over the top, and as someone just starting out writing, this kind of fiction, I didn't really want to be constrained. I didn't want to like say, oh, I'm going to write a Louis L'Amour style western, and then suddenly realize, God, I got to have a giant robot, and not be able to do that. So.
And then also be like, there's a lot of historical research involved in writing a Western and then not being torn apart by the people that have read all the Westerns.
That is true. Those people are vicious.
They
And
knew what they
rightfully
were.
so. Yes, they do.
Yes. So I have a question that's not on my list that you made me think of. So you said you can turn everything up to 11 for the superhero genre. Have you, because I've sort of faced this in one of my work in progress pieces that I'm still trudging through, which is when you have such high stakes and such like huge consequences, do you get like the fatigue of the characters when you're halfway through being like, how in the world are they going to do it as the characters? But then also, how am I going to like live up to what I've set up?
Yeah. Fortunately, I've managed to pull myself back from that. I think the most ridiculous not being the selling point, but just being where I really went over the top was in the second book, The Power Broker, in which I've got potential war with North Korea, giant robots, nanobots, a plot to basically hijack the DNA of every person on Earth, and somehow managed to cram that all into one book. And I will never do that again. Because the focus of the series is about Reuben Conway, who is a reporter, and he does not have superpowers. Mm-hmm. He has the job of reporting on superheroes, and he gets to know them, and as the series goes on, he becomes very close to them. He actually ends up marrying one of the superheroes in town, and but still, I can't really plug Galactus into that because it doesn't fit that universe. It's not the sort of story where he can be a protagonist.
Yes.
And it would start to look very much like a Jules Verne kind of thing, where the protagonist is just an observer of other people doing stuff, which is not what I wanted to write. So I don't quite turn it up to 11, but I got the freedom to do so, and I have the freedom to talk about historical things that happened in the universe as if they really were up to 11, and to make that feel more like that's what those kind of people in that world are used to.
The crazy worlds that we have them,
yeah.
them live in.
Indeed.
So, speaking of the world and these characters in this universe that you've been writing in, that you've created, I know from my own browsing and research that it's kind of like an interesting, I want to say like a unique sort of like framework that you have for your series as opposed to other ones that I've read. So do you want to give us sort of like an intro to what your book's universe is and what the series is all about?
Okay. As I already mentioned, the focal character that we follow through the series is Reuben, who is just a normal guy. No superpowers. He's not even really good looking. I describe him in one of the stories as kind of a taller, less Semitic Woody Allen. So he's just not he's not cut out to be a hero. And he ends up getting thrown into that situation where he has to be the hero a lot of times, which is what this style of fiction is about. It takes place in our world, normal Los Angeles, California, in a world, but the difference is that superhumans have always been around. And for the most part, they've been solitary. We hear about them in legends, some of the stuff that went on in the Book of Genesis, Gilgamesh, Beowulf. possibly George Washington, who never seemed, who just seems to be kind of bigger than life. We've had individuals like that, but they never put on costumes or did anything crazy. And possibly there were Greek gods and Roman gods and Norse gods, but we don't really know. But at the Battle of Belleau Wood, 3 superhumans ended up in the same Marine regiment and became aware of each other. And after World War I, when they came home, 2 of them could not just walk away from the responsibilities that their powers put on them. So they started putting on costumes because that's what pulp heroes did. If you picked up a Doc Savage or the Shadow, any of those pulp magazines, you get the idea that, oh, this is how it's done. Use that as my blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
And then more superhumans, seeing that these 2 guys were doing it, decided to get in on the act. And so since the 1920s, we've had superheroes and supervillains, and it's been part of life, and we're used to it. So by the time we get around to the 2000s, it's just a part of the background. We just have insurance for most of this stuff. We have rules in place. And this is kind of me shoehorning the universe into the comics code system that I grew up with, which in which the heroes are not allowed to kill. I do have a little bit of cursing, but I don't do on-screen sex, and so I'm trying to fit that into the world, and that's basically what keeps the system working. Is that we let superhumans get away with an awful lot as long as they don't kill anybody, as long as people with superpowers don't hurt normal people. And there's actually kind of a system of henchmen that allows them, that it doesn't allow them to rob banks, but it lets a supervillain rob a bank without killing people, without taking any, without crossing that line. And for the most part, to me anyways, it seems to work. The people that read it and the feedback I get don't tell me, oh my God, this is ridiculous. They would just melt each other to goo. And so that's kind of how that world, the way I've constructed it, works.
So is it like the Pirates Code, where it's like generally you all follow it until somebody doesn't?
Yeah, pretty much. However, if a superhuman screws up and hurts normal people, the government will put a bounty out on you. And the bounty hunters are not, they're not under the rules. They can go out and kill. And if you are, nobody is that powerful. The other thing that I did is I don't want Superman in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want Galactus. I don't want aliens. Everybody's kind of at a level where nobody's big and bad. Ooh, excuse me. Nobody's so bad that they can't be taken down. And so it tends to moderate their behavior, even except for the craziest. There are supervillains that just don't give a damn and they go out in a blaze of glory, and that's how it goes. But most people, they know, all right, look, I'm a criminal, but I'll do a couple of years and I'll be back out. And that's basically, I'm not going to get myself killed over this bank heist.
Yes, exactly. Even the villains have lives.
Yeah. Everybody's got to do something. They can't be in a costume their entire lives.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for these heroes and villain characters, do you ever explain how they get their powers, or is it just kind of like you just develop them as you go through your life?
Much as the comics I grew up reading, there's a variety of ways to get powers. The most common would be what we call the naturals. They're more or less mutants. They're people that when they hit puberty, they start to develop abilities. And we know we can identify it in their DNA. We don't know how it works. And in fact, scientifically, it doesn't work. It's impossible for it to work, because if you calculate how much energy it takes to make a person fly, you can't generate that. You'd have to have a steady input of pure calories just to generate that much energy. And yet they do it. And for some reason, these people always come out looking incredibly good in a set of spandex. They age a little slower. I mean, they'll get older, but they get like an extra 20 years on the rest of us, because that's how comics work, right? Peter Parker is still going to college. Tell me how that worked. And so that's kind of me taking that trope and twisting it and making some jokes about it. But there's a guy who's got a magic amulet. There's a kung fu. $3 bill is a martial arts master who somehow can do things with his body that nobody else but he doesn't have any superpowers. This is just all training. Shibboleth is a master of the mystic arts. And there's a guy down in Santa Fe Springs who's got a pair of 6 guns that, I swear to God, nothing can make them miss. And so there's a couple of artifacts, some other ways to get powers.
So they all sound like very pulpy throwback sort of characters.
Exactly.
Did you start with like sort of like a list of like powers and like things that you wanted to include before you wrote your thing, or did you just kind of like add them as you went along as you felt the need for various characters?
To be honest, not knowing what I was doing when I wrote the hero beat, I just kind of went at it. That's a good idea. $3 bill. He ended up being the kind of guy he is just because he told me that's who he was. He started out being a karate master, and I needed a name, so I threw out, I don't know, something bill, and then a $3 bill. That's okay. Well, you know what? All right, let's just say he is a very out man who wears a rainbow colored gi, and because he's out, he's not having a secret identity either, because that would be just like a different kind of closet to him. So yes. he lives openly in all aspects of his life. He's a lawyer. He runs a dojo, and he just kind of, as I wrote him, that's kind of how he became who he was. Herculean, I just had I wanted a strong woman who was sort of like Wonder Woman, but without the godhood. And so she just kind of, came out. And as I wrote, she just kind of developed as a character. Had I thought it out, I'd have probably tried to come up with character sheets or character descriptions before I started. And all these people would have been probably exactly the same. So it's 6 of one, half dozen of the other.
Yes. I always feel for the listeners out there, like the writing process, there's a lot of people who swear you have to have like character profiles and know every single detail. I'm not really that person until I need something very specific. Then I do like a detailed thing so that I don't mix up all the crazy details that I need to include. So
yeah, every one of them actually I have this template that's got like rows and columns and a table for me to plug in all this information, mother's maiden name, social security number, all this other stuff. It's all blank. And then when I'm writing, if something comes up, then I say, all right, well, they got brown hair. So that I'll put that in there, and hopefully I'll remember to actually update the sheet afterwards. And a lot of times I do. So much of this stuff is just still sitting there blank, and all I do is make sure that I've got the spelling of this name right.
Yes, especially for like, I feel like some superhero names can be very like exotic, so it's like you want to spell it sometimes like in a fancy way if it's just like a normal word. So it's like, oh man, did I do like an AE? Did I do an I? It's like, so I can relate to that. So you sort of mentioned part of the answer to my next question a little bit earlier, but the world that these heroes and villains live in, you said it's like our normal world, Los Angeles?
Yeah, Los Angeles, California.
What made you settle on that, and what kind of challenges or like advantages do you find writing in just like the normal world?
Well, one of the reasons why growing up I was a Marvel kid rather than a DC kid is that I related to Manhattan a lot more than I related to Central City.
Hmm.
Some fictional town. Yeah, you know what? If the rogues blow it up, then great. It's just a good story. But if you blow up Manhattan, then I kind of feel that. It feels like it drives home. I grew up in the Southern California area. Lived in part of Los Angeles. Lived in Venice and West LA and Torrance and all the communities around Los Angeles most of my life, and so I knew it very well. And I knew when I wrote this, I wanted to kind of feed off some of the energy you get from a Raymond Chandler novel. I don't know if you've ever been to Los Angeles, but you read a Raymond Chandler novel, you can still go down some of those streets, and every now and then you'll see a building that was there when he wrote it. It is just a great experience, especially coming from Los Angeles. You never see buildings that are really old very often because
Hmm.
a lot of that stuff has fallen down in earthquakes.
Oh yeah.
So when you find one, it's just a really neat experience. At least it is for me. So I wanted to try and capture some of that and feed off it, but also just knowing the area and kind of having an idea of where I want things to be, um, and then having Google Maps, you can do a lot. So the real world. Why develop my own city when I've got Google Maps and I can just well, I've done one story that took place in Kansas City. I've never been there. Uh, and I was able to know, oh, so that's where the police station is. And, right around the corner, there's where we park. And so you can use those things to kind of, maybe someone's going to fact check me on some of this, but for the most part, it's just there, so I don't have to make everything up.
Yes, I'm really thankful that we live sort of like in an age where even like 10 years ago we didn't have the technology that we have now. And
That's
I
right.
remember reading books on how to write when I was starting out like in high school, and it was like, make sure you have money to travel, make sure you go and interview people that do the professions that you're going to write about. And it's like now we can just use Street View and drive around. And then we
Yeah.
also have YouTube and
Uh-huh.
various other video places where if I need to know a specific person's job and what they do, odds are there's an interview somewhere of somebody giving me
Yeah.
everything I need. It's just like, yes.
Yep. Yep. It is. It's a marvelous age, and having come from been there, been around and doing this sort of stuff before that was available. I know how hard it was back then. I wrote a police detective story. Um, as I was broke one year and I couldn't afford Christmas gifts, so I wrote a story about a police detective following up on a serial killer that was holiday themed,
Mhm.
and it was because this is the way my mind worked. It ended up the Easter Bunny was trying to kill Santa Claus, and, and so that's kind of where the story went. But the police procedures I did were complete crap. It was just me making it up based on what I'd seen on TV.
Yes. It's like
But
whatever crime show there was, you're like, this is the jargon they use. Okay, I'm just gonna do that.
that's right.
And that
Yeah,
person that wrote those shows probably also did the same thing too.
the perps are real skell. Just crazy, the silly stuff. And of course, if you do like I do, you watch a lot of old movies and stuff. Your your slang is going to be completely outdated. Um, but that one got me. The neatest reaction was from my aunt. She said, "Nick, is there something you need to talk about? are you are there problems we should discuss?" Uh,
Yeah, that's always the big deal with families that don't really take an active interest in like stuff that you write is
right.
it's very difficult to like separate. Like people talk about readers who have never met the author separating the art from the artist. It's like how much more extreme is it to be like this is your actual family being like this is who have I been living with or going to parties with every
Yeah.
year? Like, oh my.
Well, fortunately, actually one cousin of mine does read my books, but the rest, I think, I know another cousin. he buys them. I don't think he reads them. I just think he buys them because then he could put them on his shelf. Yeah, my cousin did that.
Yeah.
But I got one cousin who actually reads them and she likes them. But you don't expect your friends and family to read this stuff anyways, when it comes down to it.
No.
I actually, when I write, I do think of a couple of my friends because that's the audience I'm going for, but I know that they won't read it. It's the people out there that you don't know, and that's kind of the most gratifying thing. Some stranger, some guy's never even heard. This guy's got this weird name with this consonant construct of SV, and then he still reads my book, and he actually had to pay for the privilege. So that to me is the greatest honor.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then for the listeners out there who are thinking of being writers, don't worry if your family and friends don't read your work, because they have another good use, which is something I do all the time, and only a few of them have caught on, is that I steal situations they've been in and I use them, and then I also steal names and I use them.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
So you're not free, you're being watched.
Plus, I could always kill them off if they annoy me.
Yes.
So
it's like, oh, that poor victim. The supers didn't get there in time. Oh. So my next question, kind of related to some of the things that you talked about, but what are some things that inspired you while you were working on, well, I guess the first book in your series, but as you continue on the series, what sort of things do you draw inspiration from?
So one of the inspirational sources that started the whole thing was I was watching a Justice League cartoon episode with my son, and Superman was fighting someone in the skies above Metropolis. And it was somebody who was super strong like him, so he slugged Superman, and Superman was through like 3 different skyscrapers. And, we know that is like those skyscrapers have got to come down now, right?
Yeah.
I don't think you can fix those because there's load-bearing walls, various other structures, and they're just out of code now. So how do insurance companies stay in business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was kind of one of those things is a grounded, what would it be like to live in that world? So that's kind of the inspiration I look at that kind of keeps me going as I do this, is that, yeah, I can focus on the big showy fight scenes, but there's real world consequences when those things happen. And that's the kind of stuff that I think a reporter would have to look at. And I think it's also kind of something that I want to see. I want to see that accurately reflected in the stories. But the other inspiration, just anytime you come up with a grand battle scene, because that's what like I said, you're turning it up to 11 with superheroes. If you would turn it up to 8, maybe you got a James Bond who's taking on a space station in Moonraker. I contend that the Roger Moore James Bond is a superhero because
Yes.
there's no other way you can do this stuff. You cannot swim through a flaming oil slick and come out with a dry clean tuxedo.
No.
That's a superpower. But so when you turn it up to 11 for these fights, is you want to make them engaging, but you still got to keep them relatable to a human being reading this and trying to process this information. I don't know if that answered your question. I think.
Yes. Well, I have another question, jumping off of what you just said, which is you have to keep the action going. Do you have any strategies that you use as you work on like epic action scenes? I feel like it's one part of the writing in the superhero genre that everyone sort of like mentions, is like, oh yeah, I realize how many times I say this person punched somebody or they threw somebody, and it's like, oh boy, I'm using the same thing over and over again.
One of the things I try to do is, well, the action is a framework,
Mm-hmm.
but I think what is really more interesting is how the character perceives it and experiences it, and the feelings. So you take a hit, you get punched in the head and you go down. Well, okay, but can I describe that in a way that would make you feel what it's like to get punched in the head and go down? right? And so, yeah, it's like the fist comes out of nowhere, and the side of my head explodes in white light, and suddenly the world is sideways, and for some reason there's tiles pressing the left side of my face. Um, that kind of an experience, I think, is a little bit more visceral than the academic. And you can do that in first person,
Mhm.
which is the book is written in first person. I don't know. It's not quite as easy to do in a third person kind of thing, because then you're really more just a blow by blow commentator. Sitting up there, and there is still trouble with, how many times can you write smite? There's just different. You got to come up, and give your thesaurus a workout, but you're really still doing the same thing. Um, and in those kind of situations, just kind of keep them short, punchy, and don't add more than you need to.
Yeah, and it's what I you just make me think that one advantage that we do have as writing prose is we can add in the sensory sort of information that you don't get from like a comic book or like watching something on a
Right.
screen. Is like when you're reading something, you're sort of I mean, you can feel what the characters are feeling as opposed to
Right.
other things.
Very much so. Plus, in superhero fiction, you get to use the sound effects, which I don't know of any other genre you can really get away with. Boom,
Oh
and
yeah.
then you get to actually spell that.
It's like half in all caps and then
Yes,
lowercase again with tons of exclamation points.
exactly.
It's like the equivalent of the pow bang from the old comics.
Yeah, exactly.
So, do you have any favorite plot line that has come to you, or do you have any twists that you thought, oh my gosh, this has got to go down on the page like right this minute, or I'm gonna lose it. I can't believe this is just like inspiration is struck.
Uh, Without giving any spoilers, from a plot line, I really liked how I liked I liked what I did in the Power Broker, even though it was insane,
Mm-hmm.
because I really had probably three different books there, um, and but I still managed to trim all the fat and end up with this very busy story, because I wanted to do kind of a James Bondy kind of uh, thriller with. I wanted to have giant robots, and I wanted to have a supervillain lair, and I had this crazy supervillain who took over North Korea by the name of Glorious Leader, and I wanted to use him in some way, and that's all the way on the other side of the world. Um, and I managed to make it work, and I was very pleased with how that all went, even though that was over the top. And I really felt like, from a personal journey perspective, the Temporary Hero uh, might be one of my best plots, just because of it's in that book. That's Ruben's chance to be a superhero. Dr. Schadenfreude's stuff gives him power, and the arc he goes through from the beginning to the end of actually being a superhero and then realizing he really shouldn't be a superhero. Um, I enjoyed how that one turned out.
That one in the set. That was the second book.
That was the third book. Power
That was
Broker
the
was the
third book.
second. Yeah.
I was gonna say you really from the sound of all the stuff that goes on in your plots, you really avoided the sophomore slump.
Oh, I guess so. I that's a term I don't really know what it means.
It's basically it's if you have like a super epic first installment of whatever it is. Usually it's like I guess it applies to either books or movies or whatever, but it's like mostly books or movies, I think. I've heard it used where your first one is so great and
Oh,
everyone's like, yeah, I can't wait for the second one. And then you get the second one. It's like, oh man, the first one was way more exciting. And it's like, oh yeah, I should have just threw more stuff into it.
well, I guess since I don't know anything about marketing, not too many people read the first one. So I couldn't have a sophomore slump because I didn't have those people clamoring for the second book.
Yeah, I really don't know what is worse for that sort of situation where it's like, yeah, you want people to see your work. So you're like, yes, please buy it. But at the same time, I sort of feel like terrified for people that they put out their first book and it's like a huge runaway hit in
Uh-huh.
like the indie world. And then you're like, oh my gosh, they probably spent, I don't even know how much time doing that first book, and you don't even know what they did before that. So then the pressure of just like, okay, now you got to top that. Like, I don't even know. I don't know if I could do that.
I don't know how you do it. I mean, I do know a lot of it is just lightning striking. You know, you put out that first book and it takes off. For every one of those, there's probably a million guys like me who put out that first book, and you know, maybe I've sold 100. I don't know how many copies I've sold in the 5 years that it's been out. Um, but it's certainly, you know, I'm still living here in Crescent City. I don't have the 6-figure movie deal yet or anything like that. So, you know, you kind of toil away in obscurity and you do it because you love it. And if it one day becomes a thing that takes off, then that's awesome. But if it doesn't, you still try and please your audience and write something that makes you happy. How'd we get on this? Oh, the sophomore slump. That's
I
right.
left. Yeah, I left my script because I was like, yes.
Well, good.
Yeah. So I guess.
All right. It's
I
all
guess
right.
but
I warned you I ramble.
well, I'm notorious for just like talking forever, especially when it comes to the superheroes and all that stuff. Of like, I consume so much now that it's like, oh boy.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
My wife has to shut me up whenever we go out in public because I do the same thing. It turns out not everybody is all that interested in superheroes and Star Wars as I am.
no, I come from a family where, like, thankfully, I've got my brothers and they're super nerds like me, so I can talk with them about things. But for the longest time, I'm the oldest, so until they were old enough to be interested in the same things as me, just like being the child that was like, yeah, I'm gonna watch whatever crazy epic fantasy and Lord of the Rings and like read as many comics as we can find at the library or wherever. It was kind of like, okay, both of my parents were not into any of that, so it's like a whole other world for them. So you don't have any. You today, it's like with technology and everything, you can go find a community and more easily than pre-streaming days. So I feel like for readers out there right now, and even the writers in the genre, it's like we're kind of all supporting each other, especially now through the crazy times of being locked down.
Being locked away in our little prisons. Yes.
Yeah, we thought we were introverts before. And now it's like, oh boy.
Way back in March, I posted on my Facebook page, you know, haha, coronavirus, you played right into my hands. I've been practicing for this since kindergarten. So it's not a problem. My wife, on the other hand, is very much an outgoing person, and she loves to get out and meet people and stuff like that. Unfortunately, with her in my life, she drags me out so I don't become a total hermit.
Yeah, we all sort of need that person to just cancel out the quiet, always in your head, always just like mulling over what's going on.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, your comment about not having, that your brothers are into the geek culture, but your parents weren't. That's very much one of those things. My wife and I are both very simpatico on fandom. We both like a lot of the same things. I can't watch most Netflix. Like I couldn't watch The Boys without her. I had to.
Oh yeah,
we had
you'd be in trouble.
Yeah, exactly. And so I'm very fortunate in that regard. But we're it. Like her family, none of them even. They couldn't even manage Settlers of Catan. They're completely clueless in this area, and my family, some of them are kind of clued in, but most of them not. So you just get used to it. But the internet bringing that community together, there's always someone to talk games with. It's beautiful.
Oh yeah, I love it. So I believe you have how many books in your series do you currently have out?
4.
4. Do you have a future beyond that for this particular series?
Yeah, I don't have a finite number. I'll keep writing Reuben stories, I think, as long as I have interesting ideas. Um, the fourth book just came out this year. The fifth one is the Drone War, and hopefully I'll get that one out next year. I just finished the first draft, and I'm doing the first wave of revisions before I send it to the editor. Um, but I also have other projects that I keep kind of when I'm not working on a Reuben story. Um, and so, like, I've got Redith, who's okay. So his stories are basically, I like to describe him as Conan the Barbarian, but in the original Orcish. He's an orc. He's an orc. Again, this is kind of that pulp style that I like. Sword and sorcery, or in his case, axe or whatever else comes to hand in sorcery. And I have a novel with him that is sort of a lit RPG thing, and then the short stories are straight fantasy. And I don't really know. I haven't published anything of any of that, and I don't know exactly what I'm going to do with that series. And then I have an idea of a space opera in a universe where the aliens are not anthropomorphic humans.
Mhm.
So they're very different and alien. But the weird thing is that all of Earth's religions have their analog in the aliens. So
Oh,
there's a Muhammad and a Christ figure in Judaism and you name it. They're all kind of mirrored amongst every species. Um, and again, it's another one of those things. I don't know where it's going to go, but it
yeah.
gives me a project to work on when I'm not doing something else.
Yes, I feel like it's very helpful from the like writing perspective where I think some readers, and I guess it's true for some of the authors that they're following, but some readers I imagine would assume that we only write superhero stuff and that's it, and we don't do anything else. But like I, every once in a while, have to take a break to
Right.
let myself recharge, and
Totally.
it's not like when you're hired by Marvel and you're only going to do Marvel. It's like we have the freedom to sort of like stretch our imaginations, and you never know what's going to pop back into your superhero stuff when you return to it after you've worked on like a grim dark
Yeah.
or something like that. And it like adds a lot of fresh flavoring, I think, to the genre.
Well, it does. Plus, there's so much that you want to do in your life. Why do you only? I mean, yes, we specialize. We're human beings. The advantage of the human animal is that we can specialize. You can be a doctor. I can be a car mechanic, and we don't have to spend all of our lives hunting and gathering.
Mhm.
But when you specialize in one form of art, then you sometimes look over and think, boy, the grass is greener over there, and it would be really nice to like scrap this, throw it all away, and I'm going to go do that instead. But rather, you can just give yourself the freedom to dabble, to go over there and try it out and write a story in a different universe or with a different set of characters. Scratch that itch, and you come back to it, you're fresh. And yeah, you've probably learned something in doing that you can transfer back over to this. Unfortunately, in the SFF world, you could write superhero and science fiction and fantasy, whereas, like, if you were doing, I don't know, paranormal,
Regency romance, like
yeah, Regency romance, paranormal fantasy, you don't want those things under the same name. So you just come up with a different pen name
yeah.
and do it that way. I have a friend who literally writes Regency romance and fantasy, and she's doing it all under her same name, and it's proving to be problematic for her because a fan of one genre looks at the other, and maybe it's not their tea, and then they feel like they wasted their money.
Yeah, well, it's such a weird, and because we do have like the freedom to just do it, and even myself, I started writing horror when I began,
Uh,
and then I decided I didn't want to do that so much because it's the same sort of thing over and over and over as I was coming up with ideas. But I mean, it's so easy now to just have the pen names. I
uh-huh.
think the hard part is as a creative person, it's like you want validation. So you want like the tendency is to be like, yeah, I want it all to be under my official name. But then I also know like professional writers that as soon as they go out of their genre, I'm like, nope, I'm not here for that. I read you for a very specific thing, and if you're not going to do it, then I'm just going to take a break from that latest book, and I'll wait another year. So,
Yeah. Well, and I think, like, I don't know. I suppose if you're Stephen King, you can do anything under the name Stephen King.
mhm.
You could write a grocery list under the name Stephen King. People would buy it.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I have probably.
you might have, but if you kind of at that stage where you've got a little success to your name, you don't want to jeopardize that by a risky project.
Mhm.
By which I would say, if you've got 5 or 6 books that are selling well, you got a fan base, they're enjoying that, but you want to do something that's totally off kilter. I don't see how you benefit by putting that under there. Um, God, who's the guy who wrote Children of Men?
Oh boy. Oh, I'm gonna look it up right now. Because now I'm like, I know, I should know this off the top, but my brain is weaker than it used to be.
Yes.
Children of Men, come on now, don't fail me. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, maybe that's not what I'm thinking of. You're talking about the movie?
John Tavener? Is that based on? Oh, P.D. James. P.D. James.
Yes.
Not guy,
Okay.
girl. I'm sorry. I didn't even realize she was a female. Phyllis Dorothy James. Okay. In on the cover of that book, at least was the copy that I bought. I bought an audio book.
Mhm.
It says not a P.D. James mystery
What?
because Children of Men really wasn't the mystery that she wrote. This was a very different project for her, and she wanted to make sure that the fans of her, I think it was mystery, whatever her genre is that she normally writes. Um, she wanted to make sure that those people didn't read this, which is kind of a science fiction, dystopian science fiction story, and she wanted to make sure that they didn't get disappointed, and I respected that, and I understood that okay, she wanted to use her name as a selling point for this book. It was really good, um, and obviously it made her a lot of money and it paid off. But
Oh
it struck
yes.
me at the time because I didn't even know what other genre she wrote. I'd never even heard of her, as can be referenced by the fact that I thought she was a male. Uh, and but she had that on the cover there, and that always kind of struck me.
It's like
The,
the reverse situation where you had no idea what her well-known genre was, and then you were directed to it through something else that
exactly,
interested you.
exactly. And there's a couple other authors I can't think of them right offhand where I've kind of come at it like that because I do everything bass backwards. You find their off-brand thing, and then oh wow, that's really good. Oh my god, it's got this whole series that he's famous for that I never even heard of.
Yep. You're like, wow. And if you like it, then you think, oh, I'm so happy there's so many of these that I don't have to wait for them to come out.
Yeah, yeah. That was like when I discovered. Okay, have you ever heard of Travis McGee? He is a
Yes.
character. When I discovered those books back when I was in my 20s, it was like a gold mine because you could read them in any order. They don't. They didn't. It's not a long overarching story. Anything. They're all good. They're all pot boilers. They're all just you know fun stuff you pick up. You get on a plane and you read them, and it's wonderful.
Oh my goodness. I
And there were
love.
so many of them.
So I'm coming to the end of my questions, but I have a couple that I've thought of
Go for it.
that I just want to pick your brain. So for pulp fiction stuff, because I've looked at pulp. I've tried to find old like the real pulpy stuff before.
Uh-huh.
Some of it is well known. Some of it is like very obscure and hard to find. Do you do you have a place that you have found them online that you'd be like this? Because I know there's some archives where it's like somebody randomly had a stack of them and scanned them, but it's like, oh my gosh, so much of that stuff is just like lost to time.
Yeah, where did I put these links? Where did I? Oh, I've got a couple links. Obviously, Project Gutenberg.
Mhm.
That's like the one everybody knows, but there's a couple others. And of course, I don't know. You know what? I'll see if I can dig them up and shoot them to you separately. Um, if I can find a way.
I always have like those weird fantasies where it's like, oh my goodness, if I could just like someday at a thrift store just find like a random box that somebody got rid of these like
Yeah.
old school with like the crazy situations, crazy covers. It's like yes.
Yeah, well, yeah, finding the hard copy would be wonderful. If let's face it, I mean, most of that paper would have
It's like
degenerated by now.
yes.
But I've been able to find all the old Robert E. Howards. Um, I think the Sprague de Camp Conans are still copyrighted, so I don't think you'll find those.
Mhm.
But you could all of the like the Princess of Mars series and all that kind of stuff.
Oh yeah.
I've been able to find that, and I just found a source for Doc Savage's,
Oh my goodness.
which and of course, right now they're all sitting on my desk because I've got. I started to read Peace Talks and
Oh
Battleground
boy.
by Jim Butcher, and then I realized it's been so long since I read a Harry Dresden story that I had no idea who
Oh
anybody was.
yes. Uh,
So I've gone back and I've started reading the entire series, and I'm about 3/4 of the way through it now. So that's my obsession. I'm just like I'm up to God, what is it? Summer Night? No, never. I'm up about book 9 right now, and I'm just pouring through those. But everything else is just piling up while I do this.
yes.
All because I want to read 2 books that just came out. Uh,
The Dresden stuff is like its own sort of like pulpy fiction because I remember listening to an interview with him online where he talked about how he initially wrote those books because some professor was like, "Stop being so artsy, just go for it. You do what you
yeah.
know works." And he like took the tropes and was like, "I'm gonna just put them together and see what happens," and end up
Yep.
being like wildly successful. So,
Yep. Stormfront paid for his house, so
oh my
it's not
gosh.
bad. It's not a bad way to do it.
So for all the listeners out there, if you are looking for, because a lot of the pulpy stuff I feel like is timeless, and a lot of stuff that we have in our popular culture right now, including like the superhero stuff, came from like the old radio plays that were little booklets at one time that before the technology caught up. Go do yourself a favor, go as far back as you can and just read some of those old things because they're so fascinating.
Right. Don't go too far because then you run off the rails and you end up buried in a Jules Verne.
Well, yeah,
I
that's one thing I didn't realize when I was getting into it a couple years ago was like, oh, really? His stuff was considered like magazine at the day in the day. Like, whoa.
and I got to say the storytelling style back then was very different from what we're used to. And this might be a Western culture thing. It might be just we're so polluted by the way we tell stories. Everything's in a 3 act structure, and we've kind of got these preconceived notions. But I just read 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea
Mhm.
as prep because I'm using Nemo in one of my projects, and because Nemo's public domain, by the way.
Ooh.
That is a little known fact, and I'm going to exploit the hell out of that. Uh, but I was reading that, and there is, oh my God, no structure. It just kind of rambles on, and there's no big climax. Nothing that happens in the Disney movie happens in this book. But
No.
if you want 42 different lists of all the sea life in a particular and in-depth descriptions, then this is your book because it's all about it's let's face it, man. This is written in the 1800s.
Mhm.
We the idea of a real submarine that could do these things is just mind blowing, and to these people, this is a wonderful story. But this different sort of storytelling that we wouldn't find entertaining today, which is obviously that's because that's I'm not the one making this discovery because when Disney made the movie, they completely just took names and a
Yep.
situation and just went off in a wildly different direction.
Yeah, those massive like doorstopper books that are considered the classics were like
Uh-huh.
previous generation's version of Netflix, where it's like for the evening you get, all right, children, you get book time from 7 p.m. to 8:30, then you go to bed.
Yeah, yeah. Very cool.
Oh, goodness.
I highly recommend it, but I wouldn't recommend reading it as an entertainment. It's maybe, especially if you're like a speed reader and then you go through there, you get the story, you're done.
Mhm. So, my next question for you is, so I guess if you are currently, I think you said you're editing something right now.
That's right.
Do you have any sort of something you can tease for people that have read the books up until now? What can they sort of expect as they await new
Um,
stuff?
okay, a Bounty Hunter. I just put on the Bounty Hunters. I just put on Amazon Unlimited. So that's new. That's just like within the last week, and that was really more of a clerical error on my part. I didn't realize it wasn't part of Kindle Unlimited, but it's there now. So if you're a reader and you want to read the fourth book, that's there. The Drone War should be out next year. I'm expecting probably summer release for that. Um, and that's really my big publishing news for today, anyways.
Mhm.
Um, yeah,
It's like, we'll see. There's a lot of time between now and next summer. It's like a lifetime away.
yeah, exactly.
I don't
One of
even
my short
remember
stories,
things I did in January. So,
one of my short stories might sell and it'll end up somewhere. Who knows? But
yep. Hey, you never know. Fingers crossed for anything.
that's right. That's right.
So, this is probably my last ish question, unless I ramble more, which um, is there anything that I have not touched upon in my questions that you would like to put out there?
Hmm. I can't, I'm sorry. I should probably have something pithy. At the Battle of Hastings, that, I've actually got nothing. I don't. That's probably the most I've talked to anybody for a period of time in about 6 months,
Oh my
which is
gosh.
horrible. I don't talk much, but I've had a great time, man. This has really been a lot of fun. So if
I'm
you're a writer out there and
yeah.
you haven't signed up to come on the show yet, this is the show you want to be on.
Thank you for the praise.
You're,
It's This is sort of something that I had always wanted to do, and then finally I chatted with people that were like, you know what, you should just go for it and do it. Stop hemming and hawing and do it. And I feel like I've learned a lot, and I my horizons have broadened. Even as somebody who writes in the genre and has read in the genre, there's always more out there. So
yeah.
if you're a reader out there, definitely go dig. There's so much out
Hmm.
there, and like I'm sure that if you're looking for it, somebody has to have it out there. And if isn't out there, then it's your job to go write write it.
That's it. That's it. Yeah, I've been wanting to do a podcast. I've never, I've never done anything like this. Had an idea for a podcast. Um, so maybe that'll be a project for me for next year. Gets, yeah, maybe after we're done here, I'll pick your brain a little bit. If you don't, not in a hurry to get onto your next one.
Yeah. I say do it. I say do it. At least put it down on paper, the
Yeah.
plan, and then it's like part way there to being like a real thing. That's what you gotta do.
But where do you go from? Okay, so you sit down, you make the show, you post it, and then like it's very much like when I published the first book, right? I put it
Mhm.
out there. I put a thing on Facebook. Hey, I published it. I did a thing, and a few people downloaded it. But of course, then that was it for like the first year. Um, what do you do? Do you have to market your show the same way you would a book, or is there a different technique that you use? Or
I mostly have just posted about it. I haven't paid for any advertising yet, but I mean, thankfully, people have sort of found it organically. I think searching for for the subject. And I know for myself, I thought that it was a good idea because I've always, and I've said it before in other episodes, but I always, when I find an author that I really like, I'm looking for an interview with them somewhere. And when there isn't one, I'm always like disappointed because I just like want to hear the person speak. Like I've read their art and then I just want to hear more from them. Like I want to know who they are.
Right.
So I'm assuming more people that are out there that are also readers, and especially since this is sort of like a relatively new genre as opposed to like comics and movies and all that. It's like people are looking for like, yeah, I've read like 5 or 6 books from somebody now. Who in the world are they? This is the indie world. Like,
yeah,
they have a website, but like, it's nice to hear the like somebody speaking. It's kind of like it's
well,
like so that's what I really like about it. So
plus they're speaking their own words. They're not filtered through their characters or anything like that. So you actually know what they're thinking, which is kind of cool.
Yes.
Yeah. But that's interesting, man. Yeah. All right, so you heard it here, folks, everybody. Watch out for geeks of a certain age.
Yeah.
Sometime next year. I don't know. That's kind of it. I thought, like, everybody in podcasting, everybody in, like, the videos, everybody looks so young. I mean, to me, you're a young guy. You're as old as you've ever been, but to me, you're a pup.
Yes.
So, like, I don't really see any geek shows for old guys.
I have found some. And I'll just throw this one out there. This is a good person to listen to. They have very short videos though, but they're on YouTube. Their channel name is The Oldest Nerd. And he talks about science fiction. And I don't know how I found him. I think I found him because I was looking for reviews of the Orville. And then he was the only person that was doing reviews of the Orville. But I've recommended his show to other like friends and people that I know that were also looking for stuff that he talks about, and they were like, yeah, I never hear the perspectives. It's so like it's a different sort of like filter. Like they're not review like I not to like put a like I don't know set of expectations on people who are older in fandoms, but they have more experience than someone who is like in their 20s. And frame a reference and like being able to know like, yeah, you like this, well, that was inspired by this, so you should check it out. Like I don't know how many times I've been recommended something that I had no clue what it was, and it's just because it was like 5 or 6 years before my time, where I'm like, wow, even then it's like we're in such a like crazy time of everything sort of being like digitized, and stuff that aired once and was never seen again is now coming back. So it's like, it's very interesting. I love hearing all the different perspectives. So I would be surprised if you didn't find somebody that was like, yes, this is what I've been searching for. My jog is now way more interesting or whatever.
Now I am suitably encouraged.
Yes.
You young whippersnappers don't know what it was like to be beaten up for liking Star Wars better than Star Trek.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, hey, these are things that the world needs to know.
Yeah. Well, it is when, like, I show every now and then. I got a 13-year-old son, and I try and show him something that like means a lot to me. All right, Star Trek, the original series, is like that is my holy grail. That's like where it starts for me, right? I mean, I've only got scattered images of it when it was on TV because it was past my bedtime. But when I was finally, they got syndicated and I was able to watch them during the daytime. That just meant so much to me. And I show it to my kid and he's like, seriously, Dad? Seriously, what are you doing? That thing has strings on it. And he thinks it's so stupid. Hopefully one day he'll develop the taste and recognize the writing behind the crappy special effects.
Oh yeah.
It's all part of the fun though.
Kids, you don't know what you are missing.
Story never stops.
It's not as the video game community says, it's not all about the graphics. It's also about the writing.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Goodness.
Well, especially for the really good geek fiction that we're talking about. Um, I don't know. You see an episode written by DC Fontana or the one by David Gerald, and you just can really, really see what what potential was there at that age of
Mhm.
the industry. And
Oh yeah.
then you get the original Battlestar Galactica series, and just everything goes out the window.
Well, I feel like a lot of the technology, like the constraints and the budgets and things that they had. I mean, constraints, they make you more creative in your like creation. Like
Right.
a lot, when you have the ability to show anything, it just means that I feel like the job is weaker because you can cover a lot of things up with visual effects now, but
Right.
really the stories and the plot and the characters and all of that is like that's supposed to be the skeleton that everything is built upon. And when that's so weak, it's like, oh boy, I don't care how flashy it is, like I'm not going to stick around.
Well, there was a lot of okay. So we're talking the '60s, the '50s, '60s, and '70s in television. Obviously, there's a lot of crap, right? There was My Mother the Car and Car 52, Where Are You, and things like that. Yeah, that were just that was the stuff that just hacked out and they got it on the screen.
Yeah, those are the
But
Adam
then
Sandlers of their time.
right, but then you get guys like Rod Serling who came out. He's a real legit science fiction writer who put together a bunch of other really legit writers and did Twilight Zone. You had, and of course, Star Trek. They weren't all magnificently written, but they hired some really good talent to write a lot of those episodes. And I think back then you could do that. And then of course, as that period died down, those writers went and did something else, and then we started
Mhm.
getting some really crappy writing in that industry. And television got this horrible, but up until then, it didn't have this bad reputation. There was some good
No.
stuff. Uh, and I think we've kind of come around, and now we're actually getting really good writing. Um, Maybe not so much on network television, but
Oh
certainly
yeah.
some of the things on the streaming services are just as good as I've ever seen.
Oh my goodness. Yes.
And
It's
then
very encouraging.
and then you get something like The Mandalorian, which is just that it's straight down the line. It follows the format of a 1960s Western, right? Right
Yes.
down to the closing credits where they've got the illustration cards as they're rolling the credits, just like they did back then. I mean, John Favreau is really just copying that style and updating it, and it just made something that's beautiful. Um, so, and even the special effects there aren't that great. I mean, there's a lot of puppetry work. It's very
Mhm.
low budget, and it's
The lip
still
syncing is a little bit like, okay, I'm extending my disbelief for you just because
exactly.
I love this property so much.
It is, but the writing is good, and the, the the way he's doing it is just such a great homage that I've just been enjoying the hell out of it. I've got the theme playing in my head for like, okay, I watched it Friday. Today is Wednesday. It's still there.
Yeah, it's like the one show where I'm like, I'm gonna sit through these credits so I can hear that music.
Exactly, exactly.
Oh,
All right.
boy. Wow. I will bring it back around and I will say for the genre, it's very nice to be able to pull all of the stuff together and just be like the things that we love from like these other storytellings, like
Right.
we can use them and like put them in. And so
Uh
it's
huh.
like I'm seeing a lot of great stuff that I'm very happy, even from like 5 years ago when I first was like, let's do a superhero book and let's publish the stuff that you wrote when you were a kid and get it all polished. It's like I'm very happy that it's all kind of like evolved and it's going to continue to keep going with new people and everything.
Isn't that's kind of a thrill that you're part of this continuum, and it's not just gonna. Well, hopefully, it won't just die out.
I
I'm,
hope not, especially with the movies and everything being on hiatus right now. It's like, okay, you guys are you're looking for it somewhere else.
in
So,
some ways, COVID might have saved the genre because I remember before, like 2019, before all this came out, everybody was like, "Oh God, man, when's superhero fatigue going to fit in?" I mean, they're going to
mhm.
stop making these because this is after Endgame, And
Mhm.
after the Spider-Man movie that came after that, people were just like, "Oh God, I'm so sick of comics." And me, never. You
Yeah.
could just literally superhero show. You could do the DuPont All Superhero Network, and I would just watch it because I eat, sleep, and drink this stuff. But I could understand other people getting tired of it. I don't think that's going to be the problem now because I think that first Marvel blockbuster that comes out in 2021, people are going to be lined up. I
Oh
think so.
yeah.
I
They're
hope so.
ready.
I hope
They're
it's
ready
worth
for it.
being lined up for.
Oh yes. That's
Yeah,
always the big question.
that is.
So I guess I will wrap it up at that
Okay.
for positive slash cautionary that for everybody out there looking forward to more stuff, like there will be more movies for sure, but there will also be a lot more books. So
Mm.
come read the books and read the newest one, read the fourth one for sure. So where can people find you on the internet if you want to be found? And
Sure.
then where can people find your books to check them out?
Well, I am, all right. My name, Nick Svolos, just all one word, .com is my website. You can find me on Facebook. Uh, I don't post much on, I don't post a lot on Facebook. I try to do better, but it's not a focus of mine, especially during a political year. I kind of stay away from all social media.
Mm-hmm.
But mostly you'll find me posting wisecracks or funny memes that I see. And then you can find me on Twitter, Nick Svolos, once at Nick Svolos. And again, that is just me trying out. I get ideas cut for comedy, and so I get a joke in my head or something, and that's where I throw it just to see if it gets any reaction. Um, and like if I get people throwing rocks at me, I know I must be on the right track. Um, and then the books, they're on Amazon exclusively right now. They're all available on Kindle Deluxe or what, Kindle Unlimited,
Kindle
and
Unlimited.
plus you can get them in
KU.
paperback. Yeah, KU.
KU, that's
And
how I know it.
yeah, so they're available in ebook. I was wide, and I may go wide again, but at the time when I was wide, I didn't see any purpose in keeping that. And I think KU is a better deal. Um,
Mhm.
like Netflix for books. I love the concept. So you know,
Definitely. And
yeah,
it's good for, I feel like our genre, it like lends itself nicely where it's like you're going to obviously want to read as many as you can in a
yeah,
month because you're that type of reader.
right. And plus, I think just that barrier to entry. I mean, even free might be too much for some people. Just
Mhm.
should I really spend it? Because I'm asking you, if you're reading one of my books, I'm asking you to spend a minimum of 6 hours with me.
Mhm.
Some guy you don't know, and I'm gonna, sit down, stay a while, and listen. Uh, you know, it's like that's a big ask. So I think
Mhm.
just anything that takes that barrier to entry out of the way is a good one.
Definitely.
Yeah.
So for the listeners out there, you have your marching orders, you know where to go. Go try out some new stuff if you haven't read, or if you've been waiting patiently for the newest installment, go get it now. It's out there. By the time this is posted, it'll really be out there,
Yep.
the digital world. So go do it.
All right.
So I'll close it up. I just want to thank you again so much for being on the show. It's been
And
a
thank you.
blast.
It has been a lot of fun.
You are welcome. I was glad to have you on.
Yeah.
For the listeners out there, just want to remind you, whether you listen to us on iTunes, YouTube, wherever, make sure you subscribe so that you don't miss out on future episodes because there shall be more. Make sure you give us a like and feel free to comment if you're able to, wherever you listened. If you talk about spoilers for any of the books, please just give it a spoiler tag so that if you're like me and you read too many comments, you can just scroll by until you have read the book. So, as always, thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate you all, whether you are new or old to this podcast, and I will see you all next time.
Bye, everyone.